It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, January 23rd. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's taking a look at the Faceoff dot today.
Yeah, my head hurts already.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are going to preview tonight's matchup against the New York Rangers. They're in a little bit of a better shape than they were a couple of weeks ago, I'd say.
Marginally better, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Plus, we are going to profile draft eligible prospect Caeden Herrington later in the show. We wanted to talk about the Flyers at the Faceoff dot because there's some interesting numbers around them this season. And I think that when we talk about the Flyers, and especially on special teams, we look at the potential of set plays here, and the faceoffs are a huge part of that, right?
It is. And, I've griped a few times about face-offs on this show, and so I figured we would start looking at some of the hard data.
Yeah. So one thing that is clear looking at the hard data is that, as is assumed, Sean Couturier is the best at faceoffs on the Philadelphia Flyers overall. You look at his numbers relative to other players in the NHL, and depending on how they spin the rankings and what the minimum requirements are, he's generally in like the 12 to 17 or 19 range overall in the NHL at percentage there.
But the way he gets utilized is what we have trouble with. So, in the defensive zone, Sean Couturier is really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's his best. In the offensive zone, when it's 5-on-5, not the best. And that's where I could see usage of like Cates or Poehling at times. But there's other times where Couturier is clearly the best guy and doesn't get utilized in the right way.
Yeah, so he is the best on the Flyers at faceoffs in the neutral zone overall, as well as the total faceoff percentage, right? His total faceoff win percentage is 56.7% right now, and which is very, very good, right? And the zone he is the quote unquote worst at is in the offensive zone, to your point. But even that, he's winning 54.2% of the faceoffs there. Now, that is in all situations. And, if you break that down, it could be that he's worse in particular times
Right.
in
It's
terms
right.
of being
I
shorthanded.
have it a
or
little
whatnot.
lower for some other situations, but
Right.
But that's fine. But it's clear that he's the better guy defensive zone face-off wise. So at home, you have control over that, or after a timeout, you have control of that. So that's one of the things that we harp on. One of the big things we harp on, if you want to read this number, because for the penalty kill for face-offs, read us those numbers, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So just breaking down the numbers in terms of situations for the team as a whole, right? So this is not by
Not one
individual
guy.
player. You look at 5-on-5. The Flyers are fourth in the NHL at 52.57. This is all natural stat trick data here. You look at them on the power play, they drop to 26th in the NHL at 48.39%. You look at the penalty kill, the Flyers are 31st in the NHL at 38.67%. So situationally, it's very clear that they're only in the positive at 5-on-5. And then when you put everything in the wash, they're still marginally above 50% overall. And that puts them at 14th, right in the middle of the league. And you're like, oh, that's not so bad. But then when you look at the special teams percentages, you're like, oh, this is terrible, right?
So if we wonder why the penalty kill has gotten worse, when you lose that face-off, you're not off
Mhm.
to a good start.
Yeah, that is absolutely true here. And so that's when you start digging in and say, okay, who should be taking those particular face-offs, especially when you have a choice, to your point,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and that's when we say, defensive zone should be Sean Couturier. He should be your guy. Now, I have some Noah Cates numbers against particular players because there are
Hmm.
times when John Tortorella wants to match him up against top centers. And we know it's unfair, but I don't know if he knows
Yeah,
it's unfair. So I have to read some of the numbers, and this is off of Instat. Nico Hischier, defensive zone, 20%. That's what he is against Nico Hischier, who's probably the best faceoff guy in the league. Against Kopitar, now this one's surprising, 67%. For some reason, maybe Kopitar is too old. No, I'm kidding. But he's got Kopitar. Austin Matthews, very interesting numbers. At center ice in neutral zone, 20%. See, this is again like, you get one of those rare faceoffs, and it's
right.
like he he
Well,
he can't do that. And then against Matthews, he's 33% in the offensive zone, so it's not bad, but it's not great.
right. And I think, you look at his stats, by zone, he is by far the best at faceoffs in the neutral zone, where he's at 53.5%, right? So you look at that, and then he's under 50% in the offensive zone. He's under 50% in the defensive zone, and it's worse off in the offensive zone than the defensive zone, right? So you look at that and you're like, why is that happening? How can he be so much better? And the conclusion you have to jump to is teams are not putting out their best face-off guys in the neutral zone because they don't
Correct.
have to,
Right. So
right?
here's two more, and this proves it. So John Tavares against, well, this is a D zone one. It's not a center ice one. John Tavares against Cates in the D zone. Cates is 25%. And Tavares, we know how good he is on faceoffs. Center ice against Sam Bennett, who is not Florida's best guy. Cates is at 0%. He couldn't beat Sam Bennett. So that backs up your point really well, because other teams are like, yeah, we could put our second line out there.
Right. So if it's a key situation, and we love Noah Cates. Noah Cates does
Yeah, this is
so
just
many
showing usage.
great,
It's just all
yeah,
about
this is
usage.
decision making in terms of who to send out there in certain situations. So if you've got an offensive or defensive zone face off, putting Couturier out there is the ideal option, even if he gets right off the ice and Cates comes back out there, right? In that situation. Now, I know you don't want to break up that line. I understand that, but there are some key situations where you have to make that
Right.
decision. Now,
Now I have one bad one for Couturier, and then unfortunately I don't have any 6-on-5. But so the one that I have for Couturier that's not favorable is third period, 5-on-5. He's at 25%.
because he's tired.
Maybe. Maybe. So that's
Yeah.
something you could look at.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, for guys we haven't talked about
Right.
yet, Morgan Frost actually has the best winning percentage in the defensive zone.
See, and
w-
we've talked about
Higher
how good
than
Morgan
Sean
Frost
Couturier.
is on faceoffs and rarely gets
Yeah.
used in these situations. Or at least to
Right.
us rarely gets used. We don't.
Well, and it could be matchups here. So, want to
Right.
put that caveat here.
Yes.
But if you look at who's getting the defensive zone faceoffs, it's pretty much split evenly between Couturier, Poehling, and Cates. Morgan Frost is only getting like 10%
He
of the
should be getting
defensive
more.
zone, but he's winning 60.87% of them. So should he at least be maybe bump that up to 15% of them? Because we understand maybe it's the opponents, but still seems like an indication he should be getting more.
He should be getting more. Kate should be getting less of those. That's what I
Yeah.
would conclude.
Yeah. I would say that as well. And because you look at Morgan Frost in the neutral zone, only 47%, because it's just like that's not his thing
No,
generally,
no,
right?
it's not.
and you look at the offensive zone, Morgan Frost is winning like a hair above 50% of those faceoffs, but he's getting the most of them in the offensive zone at 35+%. That's
Right.
what's interesting. He's
Right.
getting more of them than Sean Couturier, but Sean Couturier is winning more of them.
Right. So the interesting thing on this is what I see, and some of this data backs it up, and some of it's confusing. I get it. Is that there's definite good usage times for Couturier, and there's definite overusage here with Cates, and not
And
enough
there's some
usage.
tweaking to
Yeah,
do with
and
Morgan Frost here as
there's not
well.
enough usage with Frost.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is definitely it because, in terms of which zone is Morgan Frost getting used the most in, it's the offensive zone. And that makes sense
That makes
just on
total
it
sense.
on its face, but they should still be giving him a little bit more than they're giving him
Yeah, I
at
mean,
this
because
point.
like when you want to talk about a player's full value, he's not getting utilized to his full value.
Especially because Ryan Poehling is out and he does
Yeah,
excel at faceoffs in a lot of
yeah.
situations.
And
So,
anybody who could win, a face off on the penalty kill should be used. Anybody. If it's
yep.
even Rodrigo A-balls, use him. I mean,
And
somebody.
literally anybody because it's bad. It's real bad
It's
out
really bad.
there. All right. Well, we'll check in on this data at the end of the season, I think, and see if they've improved anything or made any changes. We'll put a link to the data in the show notes just so you understand where we got these numbers. In the meantime, the Flyers are facing I would say, belligerent New York Rangers,
That's
and
fair.
we're going to talk about them coming up next.
From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Just bet the Chiefs. Even if you hate them, just bet them. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
On tomorrow's show, we are going to recap the Rangers game we're about to talk about. We've got Flyers versus Islanders part 2 to discuss and so much more. So, with the New York Rangers, it's our second meeting of 4 this season. The Flyers won the Black Friday game way back in November, 3-1. That was a good day for all of
100
us.
years ago.
I know it feels like 100 years ago. Now the Rangers are 5th in the Metro. And despite having what has been deemed a bit of a disastrous season relative to last year,
Right.
a lot of people calling for Chris Drury's head, even still with them winning, I think they're kind of
Yeah.
like feeling better about Peter Laviolette than they were maybe a month
They're just not
ago.
talking about him now. That's all.
Yeah, it's really all the ire is being focused on Chris Drury
Right.
and roster construction here. But again, 6-1-3 in their last 10. They've gotten, a really solid performance from Igor Shesterkin. He's got 2 shutouts in a row, including their most recent game against Ottawa, where they won 5-0, but I called them belligerent in the last little segment there, and that game just devolved into chaos
Well, yeah, it looked like he
at one
punched
point.
Brady Tkachuk in the mouth with, I don't know, one of his either the blocker or the glove. I couldn't tell anymore, but
Yeah. Well, and Shesterkin was saying after the game, he's like, "I can't drop my gloves, so what
right.
was I supposed to do?"
No, I mean,
Right?
it's fair. I mean, we don't know what was said by Tkachuk or done, but we know what Tkachuk is.
Mhm.
So, like, it's hard to
Yes.
fault Shesterkin here. I've never seen him do this, so
No, it was absolutely bizarro
it
world.
was.
Um, but I do want to point out that in that game, Arthur Kaliev scored,
Yeah.
and he's been an interesting addition to the Rangers, right?
Yeah, so, like, back in his draft year, you looked at him and you said, okay, this guy's got a big shot. You know, he scored 44 goals with Hamilton in 2020. And he was also a pretty good sized body, decent skater. But then that's pretty much it. Like, I felt like he was a one-dimensional goal scorer. And the Kings got 14 goals, 13 goals, then 7 this year, and then it was goodbye. And so the Rangers have had him for 7 games, and he finally, has 2 goals now. So it seems like it took him a little time. He's got a big shot. You just have to respect it. It's one of those things. If they set him up for it, don't let him have an open lane. That's all this is about. You give him an open look, you could be in trouble.
Right. And I think it was smart of the Rangers to put him on the line with Hedel and Kreider. I think
Yes.
they are, in terms of how they play, because Hedel is a very solid center.
Yeah, all
He's
around good.
all around good, very responsible, but also pushes offensively. And then,
Yeah.
of course, we know Chris Kreider.
Right. And he'll go to the net, and that's the thing. If you got Kaliyev blasting the puck. No, that does make sense. And it's just starting to pay some dividends. So it's something that, that the Flyers have to watch out for sure.
Yeah, and I mentioned those 2 shutouts in a row by Shesterkin. His previous start was a 1-0 shootout win over Columbus. So that was a really impressive effort.
That's one that they needed. Just like we said, the Flyers had to beat them. The Rangers had to beat them. I mean, they're at a point in the standings where you can't drop that one. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And look, people wanted to bury Shesterkin at one point this year, just after he got the contract. Oh, look, he can't play with the big contract, but obviously he can. So you just have to get rubber on the net. Like, you can't start picking and choosing your shots. You can't, you just have to get the rubber on the net. And so, like, for guys like Forster and Tippett, who generally miss the net, don't think about it. Just shoot it, and that's it. Just let it go.
Yeah, which my little theory is continuing here, where on the Cates line, only 2 of the 3 are allowed to score at any given time. The third one has to be in a scoring drought, and Tyson Forster is the current guy in that situation after Bobby Brink finally got on the board there. But
I mean, it is befuddling. Just, a little commentary. It's just befuddling that at this point in the year, with 30-something games to go in the year, Tippett's got 13 goals and Forster has 12. Like, that's just, I thought Forster could maybe score, 35
25 or 30.
I think I said 30 this year, and I thought he could score 30, and it's like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And, as we know, these games are very important, and you can say, the Flyers aren't going to make the playoffs all you want, but when there's like legitimately 6 teams in the mix at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you try and win this game, no doubt, because if you do lose it, it does really tamp you down.
Right. Right. Because right now you have those 6 teams all within 2 points of each other. Right. And you have all of them either at 47 games played or 48 games played. So it's not like a ton of games in hand. There's
but it's always like 1 or 2 against the Flyers for most of these teams. That's
but right now
it's just one. Okay,
it's just one.
One's not bad.
4 of the 6 teams have 47 games played, and two of the teams, including the Flyers, have 48 games played. It's the Bruins and the Flyers.
So they're 1 game down the Flyers, but also, like, you can't let this be a 3-point game. This game goes to overtime. It doesn't help you.
Yeah. Really so right now the Rangers have 1 game in hand on the Flyers, even though they have the same number of points. The Rangers have a higher win percentage marginally right now. But, and the Flyers have the lowest win percentage of those 6 teams.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
To death. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, everybody's within spitting distance of each other here, and especially with Ottawa losing to the aforementioned Rangers. That was a really bad loss for Ottawa.
It's bad for Ottawa. It was good for the Rangers, but it was bad for the Flyers because it went to overtime. No, that one didn't go to overtime.
No,
sorry,
that one didn't go to overtime.
That one didn't go to overtime.
It was the game against Columbus.
It was the game against Columbus that was bad. That's what stuck in my head. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. That was a shootout. So, I think that this is not the time to be like, nah, they're just not making the playoffs. I would say, like, at 4 Nations or right after 4 Nations is maybe more that time, but now is not that time, in my opinion. And I think with the Rangers here, they have a better penalty kill than the Flyers do.
Yeah.
Uh, they have a better power play than the Flyers do overall, but because of their struggles earlier in the season, I would say, the Flyers are scoring more overall than the Rangers have, as a trend. So, I think it's a tough game to win in Madison Square Garden, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it's
I mean, I've
it's
covered a
definitely
bunch.
winnable.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've seen the Flyers win there. I mean, I've covered a bunch there,
Mhm.
especially Flyers Rangers. But the biggest thing here, Rachel, is the trend is going to continue, and it's going to be 1-1 or 2-2 heading into the third, and maybe even to the middle of the third. Like I just feel like this is the way the Flyers want to play, and this is a tough building to expect the outcome to go your way if that's how the game's going. That's where I think what you're talking about makes sense.
Right, and there's gonna be a lot of open ice in this game, right? In
Yeah,
terms of it's gonna be more of an end-to-end game than we've seen recently for the Flyers, just given their previous opponents. It's gonna be, like a north-south game, not an east-west game, because that's where the Rangers play. And Flyers are gonna have to adjust to that and do their job defensively, but it's not gonna be a grind out game, in my opinion.
right. Uh, I mean, it's not going to be 6-4 either. I think it'll be somewhere in between, but I still think it's going to be 2-2 at some point. The thing you have to watch out for, though, is Vincent Trocheck's at 60.4 on faceoffs. He's a shark. And
Yeah.
I think
Put
that's
Sean
going to,
Couturier out there when you
that's what you
can.
have to do. Like, you just have to do that.
Yeah,
Even if you take him off the
yeah.
ice, even if you feel like, hey, I don't want him out
Yep,
there, fine. Take him off the ice, but he's got to be there for the faceoff because it's going to be hard to beat Trocheck out there.
yep, absolutely. All right, well, we'll talk about the results of that game tomorrow. In the meantime, we're utilizing Russ's prospect expertise, and we're going to talk about Caeden Herrington, a right-handed defenseman, coming up next. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, or theater. One of my favorite things I went to recently was the Broadway show Wicked, which I went to see after seeing the movie. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And when I was looking for those tickets with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals, could even see the view from my seat before buying it. And their super deal was particularly impressive. They offer great seats at unbeatable prices, and the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Russ. So Caeden Herrington, like I said, he's a right-handed defenseman. He's 6'1", so he's size but not massive.
Actually, they have him
Uh,
6'2" on the All-American sheet, so he might have grown.
maybe. 185 was the last weight that he was
203.
registered with. Wow.
So I saw him, he looked pretty
All
filled out.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So he is turning 19 this upcoming Sunday. So happy early birthday, Caden. Um, Tell me why you want to talk about him and where he stands out.
Because I feel like he's this kind of defenseman that was hanging in the weeds for part of this season. Maybe it took him a little while to get going, but when you watch him, you realize he plays a real translatable game. Uh, I like him as far as a shot blocker, really good shot blocker. He's got good speed. He, when he's on the power play, knows how to walk the line. I'm not saying he's a big power play guy, but he gets some points. Could he be a power play too? Maybe. But even if he's not, he's just good at that anyhow and showed that off. He has a really good one-timer. He was able to show that off too. He's got his head on his shoulders. He is going to a decent school in Vermont where that's certainly not going to hurt him. And he's from Vermont and he likes ice cream. We've been through that. But I just think he's one of those prototypical American defensemen that can do a little bit of everything and seems to be getting better as the season goes on. So I look at him as like a third round pick or a late second if for some reason later in the year, which we don't get, maybe don't get a chance to talk about him again, he starts even picking it up more in points. But I mean, he's got some points, and what does he have? 9 goals, something like that. I mean, that's good. It shows that that his shot is good. So, he
Mhm.
can produce a little bit 5-on-5, and I think he's going to be valuable because he's a right-handed shot too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think ultimately that's appealing to anybody,
Right.
right? Being a right-handed defenseman. It is interesting because he's currently ranked in the most recent Central Scouting North American skaters list. He's ranked 105th. And but like nobody's really had him on their list yet. And is it just like what you're talking about in terms of, he's been in the weeds and it's
I
taking
think
time
so.
for people to catch up to him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Central Scouting has the most, resources of anybody, right? So if anybody's
Mhm.
going to find a guy like this, they'll find him first. Will they rank him correctly? Probably not, but they'll find him
Right.
first. And but they're good at that, and they're good at fleshing him out. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden he's in a game like this, people are like, "Whoa, Russ, why the hell did you drive 9 hours to Michigan?" Well, because you see players like this in the draft that I want to know about. And there's always guys like this in this game. Sometimes it becomes apparent in their draft year. Sometimes they get drafted and it doesn't become apparent for 2 more years. And then all of a sudden I go back and I'm like, yeah, I thought he was pretty good there. So that's why I go, because they're very good at getting guys that should be there and should get noticed by lots of scouts. And I'm telling you, lots.
So, given all that, is he a second round option or do you think he's third round?
I don't know yet. If I said today, I would say third. If he continues at this pace and even picks it up a little more, maybe late second. So the Flyers have 2 seconds, right? If memory
3.
serves, 3. So on that third second, he could be the ideal guy. So that's, what I would be lining him up for and seeing, keep an eye on him. I mean, clearly Patrick Sharp, send him to go see him. He's going to go Vermont. Start talking Vermont to him. Like that's
Well,
why that's
okay.
why you have him.
Right. And that's my next question because Vermont, I would say, is sort of a 1A kind
Yeah.
of school. They're not a top school,
No,
right?
I
And
mean, they're
so
not BC or BU, but they're a good
yeah,
hockey
or
program.
Minnesota Duluth or
No.
yeah. So I just like it makes me wonder, is this the place for him to develop?
Well, I mean, you could ask John LeClaire, he'd tell you yes. And my cousins went there and met at Vermont at the same time as John LeClaire, which is cool. They're still together. John's
That
around.
has nothing to do with developing
Doesn't
a
matter.
hockey player,
It
so
develops Vermont develops relationships apparently. So,
alright.
but that's where I'm getting at. No, I think we've seen some players. I mean, James Van Riemsdyk, I believe, went there, right? I'm stretching my knowledge there, but I think he may have. But there's definitely been some NHLers that have gone there. And so he could start there. And then there's this thing called the transfer portal, Rachel, where,
Right,
that's where
right.
you have to see after that first year, like what kind of opportunity he gets, what kind of ice time he gets.
Yeah, I think that's what I think is the thing that, is always interesting to me because if a guy doesn't get noticed early enough, then they're not going to a top school. And then people think, well, what's wrong with him if he's not
Right.
going to a top school? And so it's this weird cycle. And so, but on the other hand,
It was
going
New
to a school
Hampshire
like
for JVR, New Hampshire, Vermont. It's close.
Um, but going to a school like that, it allows you to develop in a little bit more anonymity. So I think there's an upside to that as
Well, I
well.
mean, opportunity. He may get more
Mhm.
opportunity there.
Yeah.
And let's say he has a great year, then other schools are going to be like, "Hey, why don't you come here and we can, and that's where that's good too." So again, he's a little older at 19. So you're seeing more of a developed guy, and he is more developed. When I saw him, I'm like, "Okay, this guy's really well put together." And so that's why late second, third round, something like that, because that's where you get these overagers and you give them a shot. Like Ronnie Attard, hey, he looked good. He may still do something, but he eventually stalled, but that's okay. It was worth it to take that shot. And I think it's worth it to take a shot on him too.
All right. Well, I think, yeah, he's definitely, again, I think given that he's older, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah,
When you look at his skill, you can really project it out a little bit better when
you
they're a
can.
little bit older, and you can see how they use their frame, especially for defensemen,
And he can
right?
help the Phantoms quicker, Rachel.
Yes, yes, which we talked about at length this week on both our Tuesday show and Wednesday show. So I think that there's a lot to be said for that. But that will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow to discuss the Flyers game against the Rangers. We're going to see if it's going to be a grudge match against the New York Islanders in the second half of a back to back, which is just brutal to have to play those teams back to back. But here we are. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in your mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology at the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen. Today, for your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.